Hi, in this video I will show how to remove and mount cassette, that is a set of rear chainrings on a bicycle wheel. And first thing, why would you want to remove a cassette? There are several reasons. First, most obvious is because it's worn, it needs replacement or something is damaged. Secondly, you might want to service a hub, and for doing that it's easier when the cassette is off. It's often necessary. Finally, if you are replacing a chain because it's worn, if the chain has been worn by more than, elongated by more than 0.5%, that means that the cassette is most likely going to start skipping when a new chain is installed, so it's better to replace it. Of course, you can first install a new chain, give it a test ride, and if it doesn't skip under load, cool. Or if it skips only on some gears, not very often, it might stop skipping after 100 or so kilometers, and then if it doesn't, you can then go and replace the cassette. Or again, as I said, if the chain is elongated by more than 0.5%, especially if it goes to 1% elongation, then a cassette is toast for sure, and you can replace it. Another note, it's impossible to tell if a cassette is worn enough to skip, for the new chain to start skipping on it by the naked eye. If it is completely toast, very much worn, you can tell that, but if it's worn just enough for the chain to frustratingly skip under load, you cannot tell it by the naked eye. So if you're buying second-hand cassettes, it's a very risky endeavor. Okay, now how do we remove them? Well, there are two most common systems of mounting cassettes. One is called Freehub and the other is called Freewheel. Let's show those. Here, in one hand I have a Freewheel, in the other one I have a Freehub. Which is which? Well, here's how to tell. You can start backpedaling, or if you've removed the wheel, turning the cassette, and if this front section is moving along with the cassette, if it is rotating too, then you're dealing with a Freehub. This cassette has a lock ring and it's mounted on Freehub splines. That's a Freehub. Now let's show a Freewheel. Hello, I'm a Freewheel. When you move a Freewheel, when you're turning it, the sprockets, this front section is not moving, it's not rotating. That way you can know that you're dealing with a Freewheel. What is this? This is an older system. I'll show it without sprockets. There is an old system called Uniglide Freehubs, where the smallest one or even smallest two sprockets are used to tighten and keep the cassette in place, to lock it. So it doesn't have a lock ring, and this front section will not move as it turns, but it's not a Freehub. These are very old systems that are now practically obsolete, but you could run into them. The way to recognize them from a Freewheel is that they have no splines on this section for removal. Freewheel does, as we'll show later, but these have no splines, and you need to use two tools like this, called chain whips. One is used to unscrew, to keep the cassette in place, and the other is used in the opposite direction to unscrew the last sprocket, and then you can unscrew and move all of the sprockets. Now let's show how to remove a Freewheel first. Important thing to consider when removing either Freewheels or Freehub cassettes is to use the proper tools. Here I have a Freewheel and the Freehub cassette removal tool. They look almost identical. Of course, the color is different in this length, but the shape of these splines looks exactly the same number of splines, and the difference is that Freewheel tool is slightly smaller in diameter, and these splines are not as tall like the Freewheel cassette removal tool. So let's try. This is a lock ring for a Freehub cassette, and if I put in a Freewheel removal tool, you can see how much room there is. These splines are almost going underneath these like protrusions where they're supposed to hang against and use the force to unscrew it or tighten it. It's got too much wiggle room, and it's very likely to slide get stuck, damaged, or damage the lock ring, so you can no longer easily remove it with a proper tool. On the other hand, if we use a Freehub removal, cassette removal tool, you can see it fits a lot more tightly. There's a lot less wiggle room, the splines are taller, and it can properly engage. So it's important to use the proper tools. You can put a freewheel removal tool into a Freehub cassette, but the Freehub removal tool will not fit into a freewheel. So if you're dealing with freewheels, you cannot miss. You can see and the tool won't fit and that's it. But if you're dealing with Freehubs, pay attention to get the proper tools. This is my favorite tool for Freehub cassettes. This is the model. It's made by Junior. Okay, now first we will remove the freewheel. For removing the freewheel, you need the freewheel removal tool. You need to slide it in. Here I will get this out. Then you can hold it in place by screwing on the wheel nut, or if it's a quick release, by placing and locking the quick release lever so that it doesn't come out. And then use something like this and put in a lot of force in order to unscrew it. I usually do that on the ground. I place the tool on top and I lean this against the wall so that when I'm trying to turn it, the wheel will not turn and slide, but it will be pushed even more hardly to the wall, keeping it more stable, like a self-securing system. And that is the way to do it if you haven't got any vise. But I have a lot of vise, and I also have a vise in the workshop, so I will use that. This is my preferred method. I put this tool into the vise and secure it. Make sure it's properly seated. Tighten this. And then I place the Freehub on top, making sure it slides into place all the way. So sometimes I need to turn it and wiggle it a bit. Okay, here it is. Now all I need to do is unscrew use the whole wheel like I'm steering a ship. And it's a good idea to look away, because if a spoke breaks under this tension, if they're not in a very good condition, these aren't, you want to protect your eyes. So it's one of the rare occasions where I'm not looking at what I'm doing. You'll probably have to use a lot of force. This was too easy, like a commercial. Okay, here, I'm unscrewing it. Here it is, it's free. Freewheel is free. I had put some anti-seize mounting paste here, and that's what allows for easy mounting and easily dismounting them, even after the whole winter of riding. So in order to mount a new freewheel, or if you have serviced the hub to put the old one back in place, you need to screw it onto the hub. And screwing the Freehub on, it's important to keep the threads aligned, to make sure you're not cross-threading it. So if it's not going smoothly and easily, then stop, unscrew it and start over. You won't be able to unscrew it by hand because it has the freewheel mechanism. You will have to use the tool. So even if you're just turned it for one turn or two, you would still have to use the tool in order to unscrew it, because otherwise it won't go. So if it goes roughly, start over. This one went in smoothly, and now I can tighten it all the way. And once it's finger tight, you can use a chain whip in order to further tighten it. You don't need to go crazy, because it will self-tighten when you're pedaling. Just make sure that it's tight enough so that when you tune your derailleur, it doesn't screw on a few more turns and move a fraction of a millimeter closer, so your derailleur becomes out of tune. This is more than enough in my opinion. And we're good to go. What about the cassette? How do we remove the cassette? Well, the first thing is the same as with the Freehub. We need to put a tool for removing the cassette inside. And if we are using a thing like this to unscrew it, then it's better to secure it if it has a threaded axle or something like this. That comes in handy, so you can keep it tightly in place without falling out. This is especially important for those cassettes where these cannot engage too deeply, when sometimes they can just go a millimeter or two because of the way the Freehub is constructed. They usually go in deeper, but sometimes they can't. So in that case, it's important to keep them in place. And this one is normal, so I can use my favorite tool. This one, it can be put on a ratchet, or it has here like a hexagonal section, so you can use like adjustable wrench, or I think it's 21 millimeter wrench for this one. I would have to check. But I prefer to use this system, but I don't put it on a ratchet when I'm trying to unscrew it, because when things are stuck and you put in a lot of force, you might damage the ratcheting system, so it's better to use a bar. It could be longer than this if you're not as strong as I am. Okay, and you will also need a chain whip, because if we try to unscrew this right now as it is, it will turn along with the Freehub, and we will be doing nothing. So we need to keep it in place using a chain whip, a very simple mechanism. I'm trying not to block the camera. Here. This is how it's placed. I want to make sure it's engaged. And now I can use it to prevent the cassette from turning. I usually do this on the ground, which I will now move to the ground. Shimano recommends crazy torque of 40 Newton meters, and that is too much, but sometimes people obey that, so you need to use all your strength. Now for this, I will need to push this down and push this down. That's the way I've oriented them, so that I can use my weight to unscrew this. And when you're doing it, when it unlocks, it will unlock suddenly, and you could tip over. So pay attention and have that in mind. So when you're standing, you will probably want to stand the other way around, not as I'm standing now, and make sure that you are stable so you don't tip over and damage anything. And it really, really often requires a huge amount of torque and force. This one is very tight. There. It's now loosened. Now I can more easily unscrew it. And it's off. Here it is. Now how do we put the cassette back? Well, on most modern Freehubs, this is probably the most common system. They have this one spline spacing that is a lot wider than all the others. Here I've put it on top. And when you look at chain rings, they also have that one spline that is a lot wider than all the others. So another catch is that this is asymmetrical. Some of these are a bit narrower, some are wider, so you cannot put this backwards. Shimano made this in order to make sure that all the sprockets are synced properly by a degree, so that the chain shifting and moving goes more smoothly. It's called hyperglide, unlike the old system called Uniglide. So the only way to mount is using the wide section on the wide section and properly oriented. If you turn it by 180 degrees, it won't fit. That's the only way to do it. With this one it's obvious because it's got an installed spacer, but some of the chain rings are not like that. Here we have a chain ring that looks almost identical on both sides, and the fact that we cannot put it backwards means it's always properly oriented, because if I try to put it the wrong way around, here this white section fits but the others don't align and it won't fit, so there's only one way to put it. With old Uniglide cassettes you could turn them around, rotate them on 180 degrees, flip them and use them like they're brand new. This one means you have to replace them when they are worn the first time, so it's good for Shimano. So as I said, when we are mounting we need to be mindful of those splines. Let's see. Here it is, the widest one. Here all the sprockets are practically all of them are on the same, in the same set, but often they are separate. So you can slide one by one and make sure to put the appropriate spacers in between, because they come spacer, sprocket, a spacer, sprocket, and so on. And now for the last one has these like serrations. That's very important to have, because it helps the lock ring engage. The lock ring engages against these serrations because it also has like small serrations, so it cannot turn freely and it's secure. And for that reason, while you can replace the other sprockets with different order or mix match different cassettes, the last sprocket you have to, for the last one, use one of the sprockets that were made to be the last one with this kind of face with edges, and make sure it's aligned properly, so it's not like this. It hasn't seated properly. It looks like it's okay, but it's not. Make sure that it's seated properly all the way. Here, now it's seated properly. The cassette needs to be a bit taller than the Freehub mechanism. If you are mix matching or something, you might want to add another spacer behind the cassette if it's not protruded far enough. Also, if the cassette is too far out, like this, the locking last sprocket will not be able to engage in the splines and it will not be prevented from turning, so that also is not a good idea. So make sure that it's engaged but still taller than the cassette, still a bit higher up. And now you can put the lock ring. I like to put some mounting paste on the lock ring threads that go inside the Freehub mechanism and on these splines, which makes it easier to unscrew later. It won't get rusted and stuck. This is mounting or anti-seize paste, and it's a good idea to use it. And now I'm screwing it in by hand, making sure I'm not cross-threading. Okay, it goes. Now I can use a tool. Alright, now I need to tighten it. I will use this tool. I will do it on the floor. I need to make sure this is tight, but I never listen to Shimano's 40 Nm recommendation. I've never had a cassette go off or disengage or this become loose when it's properly mounted with a lot lower force. I think 20 Nm is more than enough, so holding this bar halfway gives me more than enough force to tighten this. You can hear the teeth engaging as they're clicking over each other. I think this is more than enough. The required 40 Nm torque has some sense if you have separate sprockets like this. If your cassette is such that even the largest few sprockets are like this, separate, and the cassette is for 10 or more speeds, because in that case these sprockets are very thin, and so if there's not enough preload keeping them in place with that friction, they might dig into the cassette, to the Freehub splines. They might dig in the splines when you put a lot of torque on the lowest few gears, when you are climbing and putting a lot of torque using a good short slow gear ratio. So for that reason it might make sense to tighten the cassette further. However, most modern free hubs are made of steel, at least the outer body where the cassettes, where the sprockets are put, the splines are made of steel. They are no longer made by aluminum, I think by most manufacturers, and steel is hard enough to resist that. Also, most cassettes for 10 or more speeds usually have the largest few sprockets put on one spider, like one holder, one system that has them all mounted, and it has wider spline to put 3 or even more, like we've seen on that cassette, sprockets in place. So there's no risk of them digging in. So I think that 40 Newton meters, this is my opinion, use my advice on your own responsibility. How do I say it? I don't want to take any responsibility, but the way I do it, and I've had no problems, is go with 20 Newton meters at most, and that's it, that's good enough. So, more than you ever wanted to hear about cassettes. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, use the comment section below. All the additional info is given in the links of this video's description. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and cheers.